This is the first time that Gary Gensler has been in the hot seat since last March of 2023, where we had our first hearing with the SEC.
Committee will come to order.
Henry, who's going to kick this whole thing off.
Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. The hearing today is entitled Oversight of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous material to the chair for inclusion in the record. I'll now recognize myself for 4 minutes to give an opening statement. I look forward to discussing a lot of issues here today that are important to the American people. Today's hearing is to conduct oversight of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Based on recent actions taken by Chair Gensler and the majority, it's easy to forget the Securities and Exchange Commission is independent, led by a bipartisan commission. It's not solely run by the chair or a single agency head. That's why it's so critical for Congress and the American people to hear the diverse viewpoints of the full commission, which is why we have the full commission here today. Today, all 5 commissioners are testifying before our committee for the first time since 2019. Yeah. A lot has changed since then in our markets, the broader economy, and at the SEC itself. Unfortunately, not for the better. Under Chair Gensler, the SEC has become a rogue agency. It routinely exploits its authority to the detriment of our capital markets, innovation, and the American people. Chair Gensler recently said, quote, "We at the SEC live within the laws as Congress passes them," close quote. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. Don't take my word for it. A wide array of federal judges appointed by presidents from both parties have noted that the lawless nature of Chair Gensler's tenure by overturning rulemakings and enforcement actions. And enforcement actions after enforcement actions, it's overturned. This includes the proxy advisory rule, the private fund disclosure rule, the stock buyback rule, the debt box rule, grayscale, Ripple, enforcement issues, the list goes on and on. It's not just for the courts to opine here. And it's not just the courts who've taken issue with Chair Gensler's reckless agenda. More than 250 members of Congress from both parties have signed letters, dozens of letters, in fact, opposing actions taken by the SEC. Chair Gensler has proposed a slew of major interconnected rules that exceed the SEC's statutory authority, often with inadequate justification, economic analysis, and public engagement. But what stands out in this massive rulemaking agenda is the fact that Chair Gensler's failed to propose a single rule focused exclusively on facilitating capital formation, a key pillar of the Commission's statutory mission. This is in stark contrast to our committee. We've passed more than 20 bipartisan bills through the House of Representatives to strengthen public markets, help small businesses access capital, increase opportunities for all investors. Let me repeat, bipartisan bills. It appears only at Chair Gensler's SEC that capital formation becomes a partisan priority. And that's not the only area the SEC has ignored the bipartisan consensus of the American people's elected representatives. In May, the House passed FIT 21 to create clear rules of the road and provide robust consumer protections in the digital asset ecosystem. More than 2/3 of the House, including 71 Democrats, rejected Chair Gensler's approach to digital assets by supporting clarity and consumer protection with the passage of FIT 21. Yet, true to form, Chair Gensler has doubled down on regulation by enforcement. Without the regulatory clarity and consumer protections in FIT 21, the United States will continue to fall behind Europe in technological innovation and adoption. This is unheard of in modern history, that the United States would fall behind Europe in the deployment of innovative technology. Bipartisan opposition in Congress, continued rejection by the courts, and notably the end of Chevron deference should serve as a warning to Chair Gensler. Whether it's digital assets or climate policy, the SEC cannot unilaterally expand its authority. With a record like that, it's clear Chair Gensler's legacy will be defined by turning the once proud institution of the SEC into a rogue agency. I yield back, and the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the committee, the gentlewoman from California, for 4 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Gary Gensler. along with Commissioners Peirce, Crenshaw, Yoadab, Lisiarga, all to the committee today.
God, that's such a sick shot.
I'd like to start by recognizing the good work the SEC has done under the leadership of Chair Gensler. Despite repeated attacks against the agency from my Republican colleagues, the SEC has lived up to its mission of protecting investors and ensuring our capital markets remain the envy of the world. In fact, since Chair Gensler's tenure began in 2021, the agency has ensured a fair marketplace for businesses and investors by holding bad actors accountable. For example, the SEC brought 784 enforcement actions levied against $5 billion in fines, nearly $5 billion in fines. Importantly, recovered nearly $1 billion for harmed investors, and the Commission has also responded to the overwhelming number of investors, fully 80%, who have long been urging the Commission to standardize climate risk disclosures. And so, I hope the SEC will also advance additional disclosures like human capital and diversity and inclusion metrics that are not just what investors want, but good for business, bottom line. While the SEC and the rest of the Biden-Harris administration has been doing its job, unfortunately, I can't say the same for all of the House Republicans. The party of MAGA has again taken us to the edge of a shutdown, even though they know they'll need every single Democrat to keep the government open. Our nation is tired of the extreme MAGA Republican Party in Congress. But I want to do something, and I know you do too. Mr. Chairman, before the end of this year, I want us to strike a grand bargain on stablecoins and other long overdue bills. Since 2022, we have been working for hours on end to reach an agreement and have each made concessions. I strongly believe we can reach a deal that prioritizes strong protections for our nation's consumers and strong federal oversight. Our bill can have several paths for stablecoins to be created, but like nearly every other country that has a stablecoin framework, central bank, the Federal Reserve, played a dominant role overseeing this market. And importantly, stablecoins can only be truly stable if they're backed by safe and liquid reserves like short-term treasury bills. But I'll be honest, with less than 3 months left in the 118th Congress, we're running out of time to pass this. I know we can get this done if we focus. So let's make it happen. In the meantime, Democrats will continue to fight for more resources for the SEC, including by keeping the SEC and the rest of the government open so that the agency can support capital formation, open opportunities for small businesses, and protect investors. So I thank you again for your testimony, and I'm pleased that the commissioners are here. I yield back the balance of my time, and I've made a public statement to you about bipartisanship. Let's see what you do with it.
God, that was
Well,
so
I
funny.
thank the ranking member, and I thank the ranking member for starting the conversation during her tenure as chair of this committee, and got the committee rolling on digital asset and crypto policy that we were able to, that resulted in bipartisan legislation in this committee. It's my hope
What's up,
that
Ron?
the ranking
Gotta
member
catch you up.
will, that we could come to terms on a stablecoin legislation this Congress, but that we can also provide a little clarity
Yeah,
when it
I
comes
mean,
to
you didn't
digital
miss much.
assets
Actually, it was a little bit
generally.
interesting. Let
That is the bipartisan
me
will of
turn
this
down this
committee.
volume a little bit. Okay,
Now, the
so
nature of how we do that
it
is where
always
things
opens
get
up
a
with
little
Patrick
tougher when the
McHenry,
votes
right?
are
And he always does
but,
like a fantastic
I thank
delivery
the
of
ranking
just
member for
exactly everything we
the
want to hear out of
outreach
the
and
crypto
the
industry.
public
Putting
statement
Gary
of
on the
what
hot
she has
seat. It did this really
privately
cool shot of
told me in
all
no
5
uncertain terms
commissioners That was it's all five. They're all in a row. Yeah.
We'll now recognize the chair of the
yeah,
Capital Markets
Financial
Subcommittee.
Committee. That's right.
Ann Wagner.
And so it always starts out
Gensler.
with Patrick McHenry as the chair.
I thank you,
and then it
Mr. Chairman.
always goes to
Chair
Maxine
Gensler,
Waters next. And like the juxtaposition on how partisan it is just nuts, dude. It's just nuts because like to me, Patrick McHenry is just delivering the best remarks that I can imagine. And then Maxine Waters is like, these MAGA Republicans, like the SEC is doing great. They're protecting investors. They've recovered $1 billion. Sorry, we're talking over the stream, which I know is confusing.
Were simultaneously open.
So like sometimes we're going to hear people who are just talking about things that we just don't care about. So we'll find the opportunity to chat whenever. Well, let's listen to what she's saying first.
And over again, unnecessary costs being imposed on retail investors and increased bureaucratic regimes for all market participants. It is clear that when it comes to the regulating our capital markets, your agenda at the SEC is to move fast and break things. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. We'll now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Capital Markets, Mr. Sherman, for 1 minute.
Oh, here we go.
And I applaud you.
Provide an oral presentation
They're still
of the Commission's written testimony. Okay. Before we hear the presentation, though, I want to offer the reminder to those watching that the statements in response to questions that you're about to hear and the Commission is about to give are their views only.
They're saying that they don't
do not represent the views of the SEC or their fellow commissioners. It's also important to note that this is not a meeting of the Commission for purposes of the Sunshine Act.
Sorry, guys.
And therefore, nothing discussed here should be viewed as making a determination on an action before the Commission. The Commission is not authorized to discuss ongoing litigation or enforcement actions, and members will do their best to steer away from these questions that would call for answers about ongoing cases. But members have questions. So without objection, the written testimony and the written statement will be made a part of the record. Chair Gensler, you now recognized for 5 minutes for oral.
Here he goes, Gensler. Opening comments
All right.
from Gensler.
Thank you, Chairman McHenry. Good morning, everybody. Ranking Member Waters and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify along with my fellow commissioners. It's good to be together. You said the legal part, but I guess our lawyers will tell me I need to say it too, maybe. But although all 5 of us are here, it's not a meeting of the Commission under the statute known as the Sunshine Act, and as a result, we plan to be mindful to avoid deliberating on business before the agency. Each of us will be providing our own views, which do not represent those of the SEC or our fellow commissioners, although we may offer our views, which is a good give and take, and share our concerns or general issues. We'll avoid making any determination as a group during the hearing about the course of action that the Commission should or will make in the future on a particular matter, and consistent with long-running practices, will not comment on pending litigation and enforcement actions. I think we're reading from the same script, Chair.
That was funny, Gary.
That was earlier this year, our 90th birthday. In the aftermath of the 29 market crash and the fraud, scams, and other observed problems, President Franklin Roosevelt came together with Congress to enact a series of laws in the 30s. And Congress and Roosevelt understood how vital our capital markets are to investors, issuers, and a dynamic and growing economy. I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but I think it's part of the success in these last 90 years in our economy. Today, the SEC oversees the capital markets and works to deter and prevent fraud and manipulation, as well as help ensure that investment advisors carry out their duties to their clients and that companies and entrepreneurs can access capital they need to succeed. The SEC is a remarkable agency. We serve investors building for a better future and issuers raising money to fund innovation while overseeing the capital markets where they meet. The essence of this is captured in our 3-part mission: protect investors on one hand, maintain the markets in the middle, fair, orderly, and efficient, and facilitate capital formation. So capital formation meets investors and the markets in the middle. Today, we oversee over $100 trillion U.S. capital markets, and they're the deepest, most liquid in the world. To put this in context, the assets of the entire banking system are just $23.5 trillion. So So our capital markets are more than 4, almost 5 times that size.
You did that, Gary. That was all
Comprising
you.
approximately 40% of the world's capital markets, the U.S. capital markets outpace a rough 24% of our economy. So we're kind of punch above our weight class. Everyday investors benefit from the U.S. capital markets. Their investment portfolios fund home purchases, college education, retirements. Approximately 58% of U.S. households own stocks directly or indirectly. American households representing nearly 121 million individual investors own registered funds.
He's just filling time with what the accomplishments of the SEC are, right?
Today, registered investment advisors advise 57 million
Or maybe,
clients.
David, it's U.S. entrepreneurs.
An agency that
I think it was Gary Gensler.
Appropriations from Congress are about $1 billion. We've been flat funded, as many agencies across government are. While we are appropriated, we do fund ourselves with fees on stock and other transactions, so we're deficit neutral.
Oh, fees on crypto.
I'm proud to say that in 2023, the SEC staff rated us amongst the best places to work in the federal government. We ranked third among mid-sized agencies. I thank you.
You should see our open door reviews.
The opportunity to testify. Our written testimony was joint among the 5 of us. It didn't have as many adjectives or superlatives, but it did describe exactly sort of what we've done in the last 12 months, particularly the rules that we had adopted, proposed, or are being implemented. So I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and that is a representation of the opening statements for the 5 commissioners. We appreciate you yielding additional time back, and for the rest of the commissioners deferring. So we can get into questions. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Chair Gensler, in March, the Agriculture and Financial Services Committee sent you a letter about the regulatory treatment for Ether, the native token of the Ethereum blockchain.
God bless.
In the letter,
here we go.
The SEC is using different terms to describe digital assets. This includes crypto tokens, crypto security tokens, crypto asset securities, digital asset securities, digital asset and digital asset securities that are investment contracts. Does the SEC differentiate between crypto tokens and tokenized securities?
Whether any one offer or sale of an asset is a security depends on the facts and circumstances. In terms of the language or nomenclature, it's less about the terms, it's more about the economics, and it really goes down to a Supreme Court test, which is the law of the land, called the Howey test, and whether an investment contract is being offered and sold to the public, and that public is looking to others in a common enterprise.
This has been his strategy forever.
So
just
the labels
Supreme
matter
Court.
less.
We're just following the rules of the Supreme
what the
Court. Howey
economics
test.
are.
It's not my problem.
There are
it's
different
the Supreme Court's
terms,
problem.
and words have meaning. And the fact that you've used multiple different words to explain what seems to be the same phenomenon, I think really raises questions about clarity.
Well, the laws are clear, and it's written by the Supreme Court, but also
the laws are clear, but
written
what
by
we're
the
seeing
Supreme
from the
Court.
SEC is a lack of clarity. That's what I'm trying to ask you about. You have the direct question is about the different terms, and rather than answering that question, you answered a separate question. Kudos to you. Let's get into this question. Do you think that one reason why multiple terms are being used here for crypto is that there's no regulatory clarity or consensus identifying which tokens may or may not be offered pursuant to an investment contract?
I think that's absolutely true. We've taken a legally imprecise view to mask the regulatory lack of clarity.
So
let's go.
This question of an investment contract. The SEC defined crypto asset securities as an investment contract represented by the underlying crypto asset. Yet, tucked away in a footnote and on an amended complaint, the SEC clarified a security is determined by the, quote, contracts, expectations, and understandings centered on the sales and distribution of a digital asset, and not that the digital asset itself is a security. Is the SEC using inconsistent standards here? I mean, is that what's happening?
I think what's happening is that we're trying to be ambiguous because the legal precision carries with it real implications. And this is why people have been coming to us and saying we need clarity. Is the token itself a security? Or is it part of an investment contract? Is it being sold together with an investment contract? If it is, what is that investment contract and how long does it track along with the token? By using imprecise language, we've been able to sort of suggest that the token itself is a security apart from that investment contract, which has implications for secondary sales. It has implications for who can list it. And I think this is absolutely, we've fallen down on our duty as a regulator not to be precise. And so tucking into a footnote that, yes, we admit that now actually the token itself is not a security, that's something that we should have admitted long ago and then started wrestling with the difficult questions.
Dude, look at the smile on her face.
Give her a mic to drop, please.
Provide that clarity for the agency? Or is this
so
something
cathartic.
the agency can do itself?
We certainly have authority where we can provide guidance. We can use our exemptive authority. It's always helpful to have Congress weigh in, but there certainly are some guidelines we could provide in this area that we have chosen not to provide.
We
But a
have
statutory
chosen.
definition would help.
Well, I always welcome the input of Congress.
Oh, damn!
Fantastic. Everybody's writing. Your fellow
Dude, look
commissioners-
at
Smiling.
everyone's
Read that body
smiling.
language
Everyone is
today.
smiling.
So let's continue with this question. You've highlighted publicly, Commissioner Peirce,
You've always had to stand up.
concerns that SEC is devoting a disproportionate amount of time on the digital asset ecosystem and diverting limited staff resources away from other mission-critical work. Capital formation. How much work has been put into capital formation in the last 4 years for your agency?
Nothing on the positive side. I would say we've done things that are negative to capital formation.
Oh
I
my
now recognize
God.
the ranking member, Ms. Waters, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Throwing him
Chairman.
under the bus.
Chair Gensler,
Love it.
last Congress, our nation's capital markets saw huge price swings in so-called meme stocks like GameStop. As chairwoman, I convened 3 hearings, including one with the CEOs from Robinhood, Citadel, and hedge funds. We also heard from you. I later released a committee report detailing how gamification, payment for order flow, and weak oversight contributed to investors being fleeced. Following our hearings, our committee advanced several pieces of legislation to fix those problems, including my bill to finalize short selling rules and provide more clarity around hedge fund positions. You picked up where Congress left off and implemented some of these bills through rulemaking. Can you talk about the reforms you passed, as well as what additional market structure and market integrity reforms like did the SEC work on? How would these reforms increase competition and reduce conflicts of interest?
Thank you very much. I'd highlight 4 things that we've done. Just last week, actually, we unanimously adopted rules that had been put out to notice and comment about the market structure itself, promoting greater competition in that market, and in that case, relaxing a restriction in the market that now markets could quote in tighter increments, called half a penny rather than a full penny increment, and lowering the fees in the market. But earlier, we also proposed, adopted, and implemented shortening the settlement cycle. So now in America, if you sell your securities on a Monday, you get your cash on a Tuesday. You used to have to wait till Wednesday. And believe it or not, that matters to a lot of people to get that cash earlier. We also, per Congress's mandate out of the Dodd-Frank Act, we adopted a rule on some disclosure around short selling. And we also adopted some rules with regard to disclosure to clients about the execution quality, the quality in the markets they get when they sell securities. So those are the 4 items that we've done. And I think it does promote greater competition to allow people to quote stocks in tighter increments. And I do think it also helps capital formation. If the markets are more efficient, it helps both sides of the market. I think that it helps capital formation.
Why are we
and
talking about meme
investors.
stocks, David?
I don't think there's
Human
like
Maxine Waters
an
brought it up.
either or a dichotomy. I think most of what we do has helped capital formation.
Well, thank you very much. I can recall during the time that
Why is
we got
Elizabeth Warren part of
involved
this
in this
committee?
issue,
Oh,
particularly,
that's Senate.
you know,
Right.
looking
the
at the
House.
relationship
Right.
between Robinhood and Citadel, for example, and calls that we received about
Maxine
Robinhood
Waters was the
cutting
Liz
off
Warren of the House.
investments and just closing
No
down.
one's Liz Warren, man.
Is that cured or is that common?
The the closing down where investors couldn't actually buy additional securities happened because of the relationship with the clearinghouses. And I think this shortening of the settlement cycle was a big plus to that and helped limit the chance that could happen again. So I do think that that was a direct result of the hearings that you had. What was that, in February of 2021?
Well, thank you very much. I've gotten a lot of calls wanting to know, what did we do? They didn't seem to know much about the bills that we passed. And I suppose that the general public does not know what you did. And we need to make
David,
sure
dude,
that we
she's just
get
feeding
that
him layups.
information out
Just like,
in some shape or form.
uh,
So
bad,
everyone
man.
hey,
know
look at what you
that
did
we
to help meme
dealt
stock, the
with
meme
those
stock
issues
problem, and
at
wasn't,
the time
you know, how did
that
that
we
align with
experienced them.
your
Thank you.
goals
And
and
I
mission around capital formation? And
Well,
Gary's like, that absolutely aligned. That's exactly what we did.
Well, I'm so happy you asked.
It's such a layup.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Gensler, Commissioners, we're glad you're with us this morning. Chairman, over 2/3 of the members of this committee have rejected the Commission's approach to regulating digital assets.
Ooh, French Hill.
Back on track. Thank
He's
you.
on our
These
team.
bipartisan members collaborated and voted to pass our fit-for-purpose Fit 21 legislation with overwhelming bipartisan support in the House of Representatives, including 71 Democrats. All the commissioners, I think, need to recognize that our ongoing legislative work to establish a market structure for digital assets, while we've been doing that mightily here over the last 2 years, the commission has time and time again chosen to bring numerous enforcement actions in an attempt to claim authority over secondary markets and front-run Congress. Further, the commission arguments in regard to several high-profile federal court cases in regard to digital asset oversight have been rejected. And in some instances, your actions called arbitrary and capricious. So, Commissioner Peirce, this regulation by enforcement approach, is it really superior to having Congress give you statutory direction?
It's a very bad approach to trying to regulate an industry if you're trying to protect investors, if you're trying to shepherd the commission's resources well. It's very inefficient. And at the end of the day, it leaves everyone wondering where the lines of our authority are. That we have lots of areas where our authority is very clear, and we could spend our enforcement resources there, and we could spend our regulatory resources trying to provide clarity about what doesn't fit within our jurisdiction, and then we could leave the rest to Congress.
Commissioner,
I only want Hester to
Lizarraga, you just
so
worked
Only
for former
Hester
Speaker
talks.
Pelosi, and you may have noted that the former Speaker voted to pass Fit 21 this past summer. Do you support this legislation draft and efforts in Congress to establish a regulatory framework for digital assets in the United States?
Congressman, I defer to Congress on its judgment as to whether a new framework for
I don't know much about this
overseeing.
guy.
Do you think, sir, do you
is
think that
appropriate.
the existing framework that the commission's following is the right way to go, or do you think there's a gap that could be filled by a statute in Congress?
I think we're following the framework that's in place in response to violations of the law that we see in the market. So I think it's something that we're doing in pursuit of our mission and in light of the fraud that occurs in that market. And
Well, we all want people to
investor
go after fraud, but this is about people who are trying to do the right thing, and they find that an impossible task with this SEC. Commissioner Ueda, the Commission has failed to use its discretionary authority,
Yeah,
as the chairman
we like
noted in his
Ueda.
opening statement under Section 36 of the Exchange Act, to provide some regulatory clarity in the digital asset ecosystem. What could they have done? Pick an instance where you think that a working example where the commission could have used exemptive relief in solving some of these challenges, either these ETP challenges, the special broker-dealer challenges, or the Howey test itself, to have just dealt with this at the commission using exemptive relief.
Well, thank you. The commission has a wide range of existing tools that we could use to address the lack of clarity, whether it has to do with the status as a security, or whether it pertains to broker-dealers or exchanges or custodians of these types of digital assets. To my knowledge, I am the only commissioner in the history of the agency who's actually stood before a panel of judges in oral argument and articulated the Howey test after having filed a written brief with that court.
Ooh.
One of the things, so the Howey test is an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits from the efforts of others. That's from the Supreme Court. Numerous other circuit courts have elaborated what exactly that means. The commission, for instance, I'll give you one example, could have articulated specifically in the context of crypto and digital assets how you apply this test as to whether or not it's an investment contract, and therefore a security. We've done that before. For instance, to explain what fiduciary duty means under the Federal Investment Advisors Act. We have chosen not to go down that path. And right now, I've been with the commission for 20 years, or for, 18 years. I've been a securities regulator for 20 years. We are now entering into our second decade of thinking about this issue. It first popped up on my
Thank you,
agenda.
Commissioner. My time has expired. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back.
Nervous.
We'll
He was
now
really
recognize
nervous.
the gentlewoman from New York, Dr. Velasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Gensler, as you know, Section 956 of the Dodd-Frank Act tasked you and 5 other agencies with promulgating a rule to ban executive pay that incentivizes inappropriate risk-taking at financial institutions. Even though the law gave the agencies an April 2011 deadline to promulgate a rule, we still don't have
Velasquez,
one. Since
Democratic
last year,
congressperson
banking
from New York,
crisis,
strongly
Senator Van
against
Hollen,
crypto.
Van Hollen and I have
voted
written
against
to you
SAB
twice
121.
about this issue. 4 out of the 6 agencies have moved forward with a new proposal earlier this year, but the SEC and the Federal Reserve have not. Why did the SEC not move forward with the 4 agencies earlier this year?
It's not a crypto question.
Thank you. I take the mandates of Congress very seriously. When I got into the job, there were still about 10
mute this.
from the Dodd-Frank Act,
mute
including
that.
Section
We mute it. Let's talk for a
956.
bit.
Yeah, you're gonna ignore this.
All right, so Maxine Waters just pass and lay out
Under just softballs, just
Yeah.
softballs.
Yeah,
She's
so easy.
she's making it so partisan. Everyone else is trying to make this about the SEC's regulation of the digital asset industry, and then she is just making it like, but these MAGA Republicans, like she's just making it so goddamn partisan.
And then passing layups. Like the question is like, tell me how good you were, Gary, at regulating meme stocks and the chaos. He's like, well, thank you for saying that. Actually, we did a fantastic job, and this is how it improved capital formation. I'm so glad you asked. And the body language between those two, it's like clearly kind of like connecting there. That said, the juxtaposition between McHenry and Hester Peirce, every time you throw Hester Peirce the microphone in a question, she just outclasses everybody else on that panel. It's so concise and well construed.
It's so good
and well thought through that it's
direct,
just
like
makes
zero floundering, just straight to the fucking point.
You contrast that with Gary Gensler. He speaks like a politician.
Yeah.
Well, the meaning of the thing has been Supreme Court, Howey test, right? By the way, I liked where Mark, I can't pronounce his last name. I always forget. Yeah, I liked where he was going. Where he was going.
Yeah, he got cut off, unfortunately.
He was attempting to jujitsu Gary Gensler's Howey test, like because Gary Gensler keeps repeating this thing. Supreme Court has already decided it's the Howey test.
We've deferred to the Supreme Court.
And Mark's saying, I've actually gone through the lens. It's been 10 years at this thing. I've gone through the lens of filtering some of these digital assets through the Howey test, and I can tell you that many of them don't apply. He didn't get a chance to fully state that. Because, I mean,
I hope he has a second chance at that.
I do too.
Yeah.
Where are we now? Who's
Don't have to
so?
conduct economic analysis like
I think
we
it's the
do, so that
same. I think it's
also
the
adds another
same.
layer.
Vasquez.
By a show of
Yeah.
hands, is there anyone who thinks this rule should not be implemented?
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
It's a different rule. Okay. And then so let's talk about the other commissioners.
Look
here.
at
Who
that.
do we have?
I love that panel. I love that panel.
You like the
The
panel,
other
Sean?
SEC commissioners?
Yeah.
Well,
So-
we got all of them, right?
Well, so Mark and Hester are
We
like
we
pro
them.
crypto.
Those are our guys.
They traditionally dissent. And then
Yeah.
Gary Gensler and the other two, I sort of assume, at least with respect to your crypto issues, the other two commissioners basically just go along with the Gary tagline.
Yeah.
This is sort of what I'm seeing so far. When
Mhm.
Commissioner, I don't know his last name. Let me just check this. But like Jamie is his first name. When he was offered a response, it was very much like Gary Gensler tone, kind of like waffling. You know,
weak. It was weak. Yeah, I did. Oh, it kind of didn't go in either direction, but I just wasn't impressed.
Yeah,
it was more of just like I support everything that the SEC does, and I don't support anything that's against the SEC. It was like that kind of stuff, which was kind of just like whatever.
Their assets. The SEC has approved several of these products. Do you see any evidence that the savings realized by the asset issuers is being passed on to the consumer?
And like also again, like this isn't about crypto. Maxine Waters just doesn't know anything about money and finance. Like she's on the Financial House Hearing Committee. She doesn't know it. Like it's just embarrassing. She was talking about like trying to ask about like order flow with like the Robinhood and GameStop. Lady, that's like a 3 years old issue, and like you're also not getting the details right. Like she's just like talking about like the talking points that riled up the people of Robinhood who are getting fleeced, but like that was 4 years ago.
Did we solve any of that? I mean, yeah, part of Gensler's answer was like now there's some settlement happening on Sundays. It was like
Right.
cool. We always had that in crypto, Gary.
That was
All
always
right, who's this
allowed.
guy? Who's Representative Lucas?
I'd like to begin by focusing on proposed Rule 10B-1 regarding security-based swaps positions.
Yeah, not
Chairman
crypto.
Gensler, we've discussed this proposal before, and
Do you want
I
to listen
appreciate your willingness to engage on
Let's
this rule
hear if
and to meet with stakeholders. I know you're familiar with the bipartisan feedback concerning market liquidity. Chairman, would you first briefly touch on if the Commission is still taking the bipartisan feedback into consideration? And I'd also appreciate it if Commissioner Peirce would offer insight on that as well. But first you, Commissioner.
Yes, and your feedback was very helpful because you helped write this provision in the original bill, and I remember it because we worked together on some of that legislation. So while a comment period closed months ago, if feedback comes in, just like this discussion here, we continue to consult and consider that in this. This is about whether in securities-based swaps, there's some reporting or transparency for the larger positions to the agency, and secondly, whether there's any public reporting of that. And there was a lot of comments in the comment file to maybe look to just have the reporting to the agency and not have it public.
I turn this down for a second, David.
That record.
So I don't think that was a crypto question, right?
No, it wasn't.
So this is
I do kind of want to hear what
SEC would
has
go out with something really broad and very onerous and lacking the data to form the basis for it. And then we get comment back saying, hey, this is unworkable. It's going to have really adverse unintended consequences. And we pull back. And so we're thinking about it now, and I don't know where we'll come out. But I will say if we get it wrong, then we really risk roiling the markets. And so I hope we will take that consideration into account.
The SEC,
I just love everything that she says.
Wait, he might ask something crypto.
which plays a vital role for financial markets in the U.S. economy. Market participants have expressed the need to extend those timelines for implementation to be successful. Chairman Gensler, has there been consideration given to adjusting this timeline?
Yeah, it's not crypto.
We worked very closely with.
All right, so this is the person asking is Representative Frank Lucas right here. So he is Oklahoma's 3rd congressional district. On Stand with Crypto, he is a strongly support. So he's an A. He is a Republican. So he voted for FIT, voted for SAB. CBDC, anti, that kind of thing. But he's not asking crypto questions right now.
Right. Yeah. I always kind of forget that there's like another financial market out there. It's not just about crypto.
I don't even know what this question's about. It's just, something that matters, I'm sure, to some other market, but not to crypto.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because like people have problems with the SEC about their, enforcement actions, regulations, whatever. In the normal market, I forget that like people also have problems with the SEC like outside of crypto.
Yeah,
like we're not the only industry that hates the SEC.
Elon Musk, have you seen Elon Musk's Twitter feed? That's a guy that hates the SEC.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
I test her again.
Industry and other regulators to make sure we're getting this right. I've called for setting up a task force to really throw ourselves into the implementation process, and then that will put us in a place to know whether we need to extend timelines.
As many of my colleagues have discussed during the past several years, the volume and scope of the SEC rulemakings have been of concern. The two examples, the custody rule and the predictive data analytics rule, both presented major challenges to the market, and both seem to require major revisions to address the unintended consequences. Commissioner Uedea, could you discuss how the Commission could better catch these unintended consequences before reaching the proposal stage?
Custody question is all crypto.
One common tool, which we have not used in recent times, is to hold roundtables and other fact-finding type activities that would lay a better predicate before we issue an actual proposal. That is one of the challenges, I think, and concerns I've had about our current proposals, is they are so broad and so wide. We have the proposal itself, but many times we'll have dozens, if not scores, of permutations and combinations on that. When you have multiple rulemakings all at the same time on different subjects that affect the same entities, it's really hard for them to give us thoughtful feedback on that. So this is one where it's a bit like, I think the saying in construction, measure twice, cut once. We should think about doing the same thing with proposals.
Thank you, Commissioner Uedea. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with all of the guests here today,
he was not ready.
Some of you may have been told when you were
Cleaver, let me
kids.
look him up.
I don't think he likes us.
Paranoia is bad, and that we need to avoid that. It's just stuff going on in our heads. But I learned when I was a kid that bad stuff does happen that you thought about. And
oh, never mind.
So therefore, I reject any attempt to convince me that I should not be paranoid about AI.
So paranoid about AI.
It is a major concern. And I don't know if any of you saw that movie called iRobot.
Are we citing a 2000s Will Smith movie?
Everybody with the SEC and our financial agencies.
You just cited iRobot?
If you look at the movie,
Asimov's laws.
But if you look at it now, you're going to find out that all those robots were white. And I was thinking, Will Smith should have gotten a couple of black and brown robots, but
what the fuck is he going on
that's
about?
my paranoia.
What? That's not where I thought he was going with that.
You have been somewhat concerned, Mr. Chairman. And I agree. I think I agree with what you were trying to say in an article, that if we are not intentional with rulemaking, we could set ourselves up where powerful AI systems could dominate human decision-making. What should we be doing as it relates to AI?
I love how we've already covered this topics on our podcast like 2 years ago.
I think it's one of the most transformative technologies of our times, but I share your view that it presents challenges. I think of another great movie. It was a romantic comedy, not iRobot, but Her. And you might remember Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the virtual assistant,
that movie, didn't you, Gary?
girlfriend.
You like that movie?
Joaquin Phoenix. And
these robots are trying to tell us something.
Yeah. Well, at some point, it went offline, but it was 8,316 love interests that she had that all had broken hearts. It's a good movie. But the point is, we could end up with the same thing. We have 3 large cloud providers. 75% of the financial industry relies on 2 of those cloud providers. Those cloud providers are the dominant players in artificial intelligence, are growing to be the dominant. And we could see 75% of the banks and broker-dealers and financial sort of relying on a couple of Scarlett Johansson, virtual assistants, so to speak. And I think that a future chair of a banking committee, House Financial Services Committee, could be overseeing a hearing saying, what happened? Why did we have the financial crisis of 2030 or 2035 or something? I think that's a risk. What to do about it? It's hard because it's across so many different financial actors. How do you sort of maintain diversity? And this is diversity of computers, diversity of competition amongst those algorithms. It's a
how
hard
about
challenge
crypto,
to
Gary?
solve.
Decentralized AI,
I agree
Gary.
with you. It's a challenge. It's real.
Diversity.
I'm interested in any of our other speakers or guests. If you have any views on
David,
artificial intelligence that may be of some value
Gary's coming
to
for
those of
IA
us
next.
who are in Congress.
I mean, he did the whole pivot.
I mean,
to AI
I think
thing, too.
skepticism is always warranted, but I think we also need to look at the promise of the new technology in ways that it can help us as a regulator to regulate better and can help the industry to better serve more people at a lower cost. And so we need to
Technology?
balance the skepticism with the optimism
Reduce
for
the
what the
cost of doing
technology can
things?
do.
Congressman, as a member of the military and as part of the Green
He's like,
Commission,
that's not the answer I
look
wanted.
holistically at AI
I
across
was
the
not
board and
prepared
not
for
look
that.
at it just necessarily in the isolated world of financial background or the military side. I think we need
She
to
doesn't
learn
like
from each
crypto,
other
right?
across the government and implement something on a holistic basis to allow technology to grow and to be useful and really transform, possibly, as Chair Gensler said, the world as we know it, but also learn where we need to put holistic protections in place and how we can sort of learn from it and adopt appropriately.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
She's skeptical.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take a minute and to thank you for your service to the United States Congress and this committee. Quite likely when we come back next time, and if we hold another meeting, you'll be a retiring member of Congress. But during your period of time that you've been here, I've enjoyed not only your confidence and your friendship, but your service. I want to personally
Who's he talking
thank
to?
you for that.
Who's he thanking?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Patrick.
Patrick.
Yeah,
Mr.
Patrick
Chairman,
Henry. He's
you and I have
going to the sunset.
had an
He's
opportunity
retiring.
to deal with each other a couple of times, and you know my comments that I have made to you about the rights of people who are on the other side that you regulate. Today, I'd like to just take a few minutes and tell you the things that I think are important for the entire commission here.
Cool.
One of
gets an
them
A
is
on
that I
crypto.
believe that you need more fairness and balance. I think the SEC does not have fairness nor balance. I think that the SEC is engaged in selective enforcement. I think
Yes.
they're engaged in selective enforcement, perhaps of 1 or 2 or 5 people in a marketplace that were not really guilty of anything, but simply were someone that you wanted to make an example of. I think that you can come up here and hear members say how proud they are of you for having $5 billion worth of fines that you have put off of people who have theoretically done something wrong. That diminishes shareholder value too. When you fine a company, it takes away shareholder value. And that's one of the things that your commissioners have talked about today, that their mission is to ensure shareholder value and to protect people. Mr. Chairman, I believe that you should engage, as well as all the commissioners, in making sure that you do not make examples of a few select people. Mr. Chairman, I believe you should look at the mission statement that the SEC has. perhaps on a daily basis, and make sure that your staff and you live up to that. I believe that if you get in trouble, if you didn't intend to get in trouble, you ought to be able to get out of trouble. You ought to be able to work your way through regulatory morass instead of waiting for the average of 140 days or whatever it might be for you to respond back to a person. Mr. Chairman, I believe that the marketplace is complex. I believe that things happen that none of us have any real control over, including bankruptcies or other matters. It's when you collude to do something, or you have insider information, or you fail to do your job properly, due diligence or whatever. But I can give you examples where the SEC is causing individual agents in the marketplace who also lost money in certain assets, and the SEC came after them and had them spend $500,000 of legal counsel to defend themselves against something they, nor they alone, were engaged in, but it was selective enforcement. And I have seen this across this Biden administration at the Department of Justice, at the SEC, and other places. And I believe that there is some demand put on you, or something that you're doing to cause actions that are neither fair nor balanced. I've got a minute left. Sir, would you like to engage that
Wow, just a
issue
verbal
and defend
lashing,
that?
and now you
I'm
respond.
very proud of the agency and the hardworking folks of the agency, the 1,300 folks
Yeah,
in
but he's just gonna
enforcement, but
decline everything.
all the other
It's like,
lawyers and
everything he says
accountants
is not
and
real, is what he's saying.
economists and my fellow commissioners that support that effort. They follow the facts and the law where they take them. We do bring, as noted, 700 or so enforcement actions a year, many of them settled actions. We look to
He's missing the point.
People who cooperate with the agency and really recognize that cooperation with the agency to try to, as you say, get things right. I, by the way, would concur with you. Markets are complex and life is complex, and people do often make genuine, just human mistakes. But our enforcement division, I couldn't be prouder of them.
I will look
and they
forward
following.
to testing that theory, and I want to thank each of you for your service, not just to the SEC, but the American people, and I will challenge you properly and professionally on this issue. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Just a dad talk from Pete Sessions there.
Mr. Foster is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Foster, okay.
To our witnesses. Price discovery is critically important to the success of our capital markets, and it's really foundational to investor confidence. However, with the rise of day trading and trading apps, social media buzz seems to have as much an effect sometimes on equity pricing as economic fundamentals. This concern gets amplified when the social media is swamped by inauthentic AI-generated bot accounts that the social media platforms seem unwilling or incapable of identifying and removing. It is obvious that manipulative misinformation can have long-lasting impacts on companies' reputations and their ability to raise capital. And perhaps abusive short selling is the most obvious example where this could happen. Chairman Gensler, do you think that revisiting short selling regulations is necessary to prevent this sort of manipulations that can happen on social media or other false claims injected into fake media sites, various kinds of inauthentic
misinformation theme
speech?
Let me start with artificial intelligence and then go to the short selling, if I might. But I think fraud is fraud, and whomever deploys a model has a responsibility to make sure that they're not using that model to defraud the public, manipulate the markets, as you say. But I think it will be an interesting challenge over time, whether this committee or judiciary committees across government will have to sort of address this concept of the state of mind and what's the lawyers call scienter. Is the model thinking the human that deploys them, I believe, has certain responsibilities, but that may play out in Congress as well. I think in terms of short selling, it is an important part of the markets. This is a very important part of price discovery that we in our capital markets, somebody can express a view that a stock will go up, and somebody can express a view that it's going to go down. What's critical is that people are not trying to make false claims, lie to the public, manipulate markets.
Yeah, and so the issue is the anonymous AI-generated trash that's appearing on social media and our inability apparently to stop it. And that's very different than an opinion letter in the Wall Street Journal where everyone knows who's involved. It's a very different.
And I can only speak for myself, but I contend that that individual who deploys the model has certain obligations to ensure that that model is not making false claims, misleading.
Gary wants to regulate AI
if we can figure out
models.
who they are. Well, separately, I've heard concerns from industry participants about influencers, bloggers, celebrities, and others that use their celebrity status to promote investments without disclosing that they are in fact being paid to do so. And what's worse is when the person that's paying the promoter may have a position in the company that they intend to liquidate alongside the promotion, which is really a classic pump and dump scheme.
I do not
There's
hate this
been some
question at all.
high-profile examples recently in the crypto space, but I understand there may be issues in just the over-the-counter markets as well, where smaller companies raise capital. Can you say something about that?
Congress actually spoke of this in our original statute and thought that when you were advertising or promoting a stock or security, that you had additional obligations. So put in place rules, a law against if you're touting, you have to say who paid you and did you get paid. You can't just say hashtag ad. You have to say something more. And that was Congress's will. And we have, from time to time, found celebrities who've forgotten that important law, and we've brought enforcement
or never
actions.
learned it. Yeah, so
that was fine. I'm fine with all of that.
Transparency, I support it.
That's fine. I'm okay with that.
I would say I think the laws are strong. I mean, it's always gaps in resources, and we get on average a year 40 to 50,000 tips, complaints, and referrals. That's 4,000 a month or so, and we have to prioritize those tips and complaints and referrals.
Okay, and let's see, I've got about half a minute here. I didn't support the FIP 21 Act. And one of the things that confused me about it is that it defines a 20% threshold for ownership to be enough decentralized to become a tradable equity. And so this, and the problem is that at the same time it allowed anonymous self-hosted wallets. So how would the SEC identify who owns 20%?
Gentleman's time's expired. We'll ask the chair to respond
for the
record. The gentleman from Michigan, the chair of the Oversight Subcommittee, Mr. Heising, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take one quick second, and I first want to say thank you to you for your leadership, your confidence in not just me, but your leadership team as we tackled some very tough issues, and more importantly, your friendship. And of course, I'd appreciate 15 seconds back on the clock, but it is an important note to say thank you. I'm going to start here. First of all, thank you all for being here. I think this is an important step. It's been quite a while since we've seen all of you here at one time. Commissioner Peirce, you've noted that in keeping with the materiality standard informing SEC rulemaking on disclosures, quote, information is material if there is a substantial likelihood that an objective, reasonable investor, by the way, that's language that Thurgood Marshall used in the 1976 court case establishing materiality, would consider the information important to an investment or voting decision. All reasonable investors value financial returns, but they may diverge in which non-economic considerations are important. Could you explain the difference between that, why the commission has diverged from this traditional, well-established materiality standard, and we've started hearing, quote, decision useful language? Unpack that a little bit, please.
I think the reason to depart from a materiality standard and instead embrace this more ambiguous decision useful standard is so that We can listen to the voices of non-investors, people who have non-investment interests in companies and seeing companies do things. And so you open it up to this wide range of stakeholders who has any list of non-essential, non-economic interests in a company.
Do you have concerns with that?
Absolutely. I mean, our job is to get information to investors to help them make decisions, not to a random group of stakeholders.
And it seems the courts have had concerns with that as well. All right. Chair Gensler, we've seen there be an uptick in the industry pressure at the court level against the SEC. But we've also seen the SEC embark on a rulemaking agenda that some have called frenzied and rushed. In testimony before the committee, the chair noted the number of finalized rules is less than a number of my predecessors in a comparable time frame. Essentially, that your rulemaking onslaught is on par with past chairs. Again, to both Ms. Peirce and Mr. Ueda, although the chair might technically be correct on that, isn't it true that the breadth of this rulemaking is indeed historic that you've seen? And how would you respond to those comments about it's just been business as usual?
Historically anti-crypto.
Yeah, the breadth of the subject matter covered, the number of rules, and the complexity of the rules, and as Commissioner Ueda mentioned, the number of different alternatives being offered in those rules means that it's a very difficult lift for the public to respond.
Mr. Ueda, quickly.
Yeah, you can't compare just top line numbers. You have to look at the substance, and these are very, very complex and wide-ranging rule proposals under the current chairmanship.
Okay, I'm going to try and get through two more things here. And Chair Gensler, I'm going to turn to you. I'm increasingly concerned the SEC is moving away from that, acting as an independent commission as it's intended to be. Obviously, I believe the overreach via the climate disclosure rule now seems to be extending to companies seeking accessing U.S. stock exchange, the ability of ESG activist groups to unduly influence what is supposed to be an impartial assessment of a company creates a dangerous precedent. Last week, the House passed my bipartisan piece of legislation that pushes back on some of these groups who, frankly, have hijacked our capital markets process. Please, yes or no, as I want to hit one more, will you commit to ensuring the SEC will not allow ESG agendas to drive whether a company that has accurately and fully disclosed its business operations and risk can be publicly listed in the U.S.? I don't think it's a confusing question. Are you going to allow ESG activists to influence your decision whether a company is allowed access or not to be listed?
Companies, as long as they comply with the law, can list. And I also want to agree with Commissioner Peirce earlier. Materiality is about the investors, and decision useful, because they were words I use, are about investors. Investors making decisions,
I've got
not
5
non-investors.
Sorry. PCAOB, yes or no, if, as Ms. Ho at the PCAOB has said, that the actions may end up breaking the public company auditing profession's back, particularly for small firms. Yes or no, if we break the profession in the name of investor protection, are we really protecting investors? I know I will ask for a written response on that, but I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
All the money and power in this town is with the crypto industry. They make money literally by making money. They put a couple $100 million that we know about into politics just recently. And of course I say
we can survive.
That we know about because crypto's one magic skill is the ability to hide money, hence the name cryptocurrency, which means hidden money.
We are literally
if you look at our campaign finance laws, there's no way for
an open chain, Brad,
to enforce them.
Nice try.
When a politician accepts crypto and has really no idea where that money's coming from.
No, you can actually publish.
You have no idea where the money's coming from.
Yeah,
the rest of us totally know.
Thank you for standing up for the rights of those investors who care about the environmental impact on their investment. And let me point out that many courts' decisions have basically come down to materiality is decision useful information. And it is simply a renunciation of capitalism for government to say investor, you are wrong. You can't make decisions based on the environment. You have to make your decisions only based on earnings per share. Last I heard, government telling the investors what to do is not the capitalist system. Commissioner Crenshaw, you haven't had a question. This is something we discussed, and it particularly concerns me about the crypto industry. It's my understanding that you have ethics rules so that if you leave the commission, you can't lobby the commission for the people who are paying you for another 2 years. Now, we know crypto is trying to influence Congress, but there are hundreds of us. It's very inefficient. There are only 5 of you, and frankly, they don't really want to influence us. We want to influence you. It's my understanding that crypto is free to offer any one of you a $5 million a year, 5-year contract, so long as in the first 2 years you're not going to be lobbying the commission. Do I have that right? Is that the rule? Or I'm not suggesting any career changes here, but
argument.
Are the rules so loose that any commissioner could take a $5 million a year contract from crypto?
I believe they could take a job at a crypto entity, and there are ethics restrictions in place.
And the ethics restrictions don't differentiate between a $250,000 a year job and a $50 million a year job.
I don't believe so.
Well, maybe you'd want to propose at least some limits on what those jobs could do. I'm concerned, Chair Gensler, about Webull and others who might have investor information in China. Is the commission going to do anything, especially in light of our concerns here about TikTok, to make sure that when investor data is in the hands of, say, a brokerage firm, that it is not accessible to the Chinese Communist Party?
Whether a brokerage firm is owned by Chinese or Americans or Europeans, they have to comply with their laws and they have to protect information, customer information.
But does that, as a practical matter, are they free to comply with those laws by storing the information in China? There might be cheap data storage available in Shanghai.
No, I believe so. As long as they comply with our laws, they can store it in any geography.
Well, I would hope the commission would look at a requirement that understands that in reality, if it's stored in Shanghai, it's not protected from the Chinese Communist Party.
What
we should require that the data not be stored in China. And I want to commend you for withdrawing, and I know you're going to be republishing rules on swing pricing, liquidity rule, safeguarding the safeguarding rule. And I think you've really listened to Congress. I think those rules needed change. On the other hand, I want to commend you for the rules giving climate investors the information that they need and deserve. I want to point out, as you look at the safeguarding rule, that there are, do you see any reason why that would have to deal with the safeguarding of real estate? I mean, it's hard to move and the county records are pretty clear. Are we worried that would we need the safeguarding rule to cover real estate?
Again, we put something out for comment. We got a lot of feedback, including around real estate, and I've asked staff to take all those comments in and make a recommendation to the 5 of us on how to move forward on, in essence, reproposing, taking into consideration the scope of the assets, for instance, this real estate, but also the requirements. There were many comments about the requirements and whether to do that which Congress had originally laid out in Dodd-Frank on this.
The gentlewoman from Missouri, the chair of the Capital Markets Subcommittee, Ms. Wagner, is now recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Peirce, the SEC continues to extract huge settlements for enforcement cases relating to, I'm going to call, off-channel communications. Firms have paid a combined total of over $3 billion in fines as part of the overall sweep. Has any fraud or customer harm been found, and what is the SEC basing these fines on?
It is certainly has become a cash cow for the SEC, and so the typical case is not based on fraud or any evidence of a problem other than a record-keeping problem. Now, that's a serious problem, But I think we need to address it not through enforcement first, but through regulatory work that involves working with people on the outside the industry and so forth to try to figure out how to make these rules workable and also effective for our
So no
regulators.
fraud, no customer harm. Why didn't the SEC issue a risk alert during COVID, for instance, when it knew that the whole world was becoming more reliant on using phones for communication during this time of abrupt, forced remote work? Why did the SEC wait and play gotcha after the fact with enforcement actions?
Yeah, I mean, I think you point out that a lot of this probably did stem from the fact that COVID changed the world and the way we do things. And that's why we should have taken a regulatory approach first. And then for people who were outliers and bad actors and were defying the rules, we could have brought enforcement action.
Over $3 billion. It's quite the cash cow. I'd like to enter, Mr. Chairman, into the record the
$3
dissent
billion
that Commissioners
in enforcement
Hurst
actions?
and Ueda released
Cash
today
cow.
regarding this. Commissioner Ueda, pardon me. Retail investors are statutorily allowed to invest in private investments, including private funds via closed-end funds, which are subject to important protections under the Investment Company Act. However, SEC staff, through informal guidance, whatever that is, and not rulemaking, has prohibited a closed-end fund from investing more than 15% of its net assets in privately offered funds, unless the closed-end fund's shares are available only to accredited investors. Private funds have grown enormously in number and variety, sir, in the past 2 decades, but ordinary investors are unable to invest in them. That's why I sponsored bipartisan legislation, along with Representative Meeks, the Increasing Investor Opportunities Act, to overturn the informal SEC staff position and allow closed-end funds to more fully invest in private funds. Earlier this year, this important legislation passed the House with significant bipartisan support. Why has the SEC permitted its staff to deny everyday ordinary retail investors the same opportunities for investment returns from alternative asset classes enjoyed by affluent investors?
I find the position taken by the staff to be frustrating. Those staff positions are under the control, though, of not the commission, but whoever serves as chairman. One thing we've learned is that diversification matters, particularly for retirement investors.
Yes.
For 2.5 years, I was a state securities regulator. Therefore, I'm a member of CalPERS. My portfolio at CalPERS looks very different with its allocation to private equity, venture capital, and private credit than I can ever obtain as an ordinary worker trying to seek to save money through an IRA or a 401k plan.
So you're obviously concerned about the SEC staff position?
I'm sorry.
You're concerned about this SEC
Yes, I
staff
am.
position. And should retail investors have access to these investments through regulated products such as closed-end funds?
I think we need to provide those opportunities to retail investors, yes.
Yes, not just the rich and affluent. There's bipartisan approach to the SEC swing pricing proposal. We've heard a little bit about it. Industry commenters have claimed that the proposal is both unworkable and harmful for retail investors. And even the Consumer Federation of America opposes the proposal. Let me just say, Chair Gensler, did you still intend, because I'm not clear on this, to advance this swing pricing rule in the face of overwhelming opposition, sir?
I wish I knew more about these questions.
We got a lot of comments, as you mentioned, about the challenges of that rule. Also, I want to note that the banking regulators oversee about $6 trillion of collective investment trusts. And what we've said, and what I've said is, until we see what the bank regulators do, I think
all right,
we
so
should
still not clear.
hold on this.
I would say to Mr. Chairman and others that oppose it greatly, along with 2 of your commissioners. A reproposal cure has got fatal flaws too. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman, as my time has expired.
The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I understand, Mr. Chairman, this could be one of your last hearings as a member of this esteemed body, and I just want to say that while we spend most of our time arguing, I still regard you as a good and decent man, and I'm pleased to have served with you. I also have to confess that there are a handful of your Republican colleagues that I wish would leave Congress. However,
shots fired.
You are not among them. You are not among them. So thank you for your service to Congress. Really appreciate it. Chairman Gensler, Mr. Larinaga, good to see you again. Welcome back. Welcome back. Mr. Chairman, so on September 3rd, 2024, let me shift over here, the FBI issued an alert warning the crypto industry that North Korea is, quote, conducting highly tailored, difficult to detect social engineering campaigns against employees of decentralized finance, DeFi, cryptocurrency, and other businesses to deploy malware and steal cryptocurrency. The alert specifically noted that North Korea has, quote, conducted research on a variety of targets connected to cryptocurrency exchange-traded funds, which suggests ETFs may be a target of North Korea soon. So North Korea, as you well know, is a serious threat to the United States, and I know you've done an awful lot of work on the crypto ETFs, and I know you're aware that the vast majority of the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of funds in these ETFs are held in custody at a single entity. And just the structure of this, doesn't this put investors' funds, unlike the traditional financial system, doesn't this put investors' funds at serious risk if there is a breach, a cybersecurity incident?
Coinbase has too much ETF.
It is one of
custody
the
crypto
sort of
assets,
structural challenges with crypto itself, that it's stored on this irrevocable ledger that if somebody takes a hack and is able to take it, and so the concentration could be a risk, and that's why competition is good as well. I know there's other service providers that are looking to provide that service to custody that crypto as well.
It's ironic that, this is supposed to be a decentralized system, but we have this concentration that introduces so much risk in the system.
Then let us
it is
self-custody
most
everything.
definitely.
You guys hate that
Finance
too.
tends towards concentration, but crypto field is not immune to that. There's quite a bit of concentration. That FBI alert that went out also noted it was attached to a whole report that talked about $4 or $5 billion of investor harm that had happened just in the last year as well.
Right. The other piece of this related to that is the way the stack works. So you've spoken before about the risks of the vertical integration of crypto, where we have, for example, you get a single entity should not be acting simultaneously as an exchange, then a broker and a dealer and a custodian.
Yeah.
Because that puts customer funds at risk and presents conflicts of interest as well, as we saw with FTX. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about why these are concerns, and do you take issue with the proposed market structure legislation under FIT 21 that's been introduced, and what changes you might suggest?
Look, I think one of the hallmarks of our capital markets have been that stock exchanges are separate from broker-dealers, that they each make money, they each have an important role, but that conflict is not mixed. We wouldn't have the New York Stock Exchange actually operating a hedge fund, operating the dealers on the floor as well. They're kind of separated. And we've seen in the so-called crypto exchanges commingling this and also taking custody of their customer funds. And at times, as you mentioned, the FTX collapse, being fast and loose with those customer funds.
I actually don't care.
Remember he accused
what I worry about
that?
is it seems to be
he accused KRAKEN of doing that. The point I think is valid, but the application that he uses to make that point is just terrible.
We're going to put this on a blockchain that we can sidestep all of the regulations that we've adopted here for the traditional finance industry.
I think that the time-tested protections are really important. I would also say court after court has actually spoken, it's to an earlier point if I can, that this Howie's standard is actually quite clear. One court said Howie provides clearly expressed test for determining what constitutes an investment contract. Another court said the SEC based its claim on straightforward application of a venerable Supreme Court precedent. I could go on and on.
It's got these
and
Waldo
read
glasses,
quote after quote from cases in the crypto field.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your courtesty, Mr.
Glasses
Chairman,
on
and
you.
I yield back.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Gensler, you say Howie is clear, but let me tell you what's not clear. What's not clear is what the rules of the road are if you're in the crypto business.
Yep.
Over the past several years, the SEC has brought approximately 150 enforcement actions related to the digital asset ecosystem. In 2023 alone, the SEC brought nearly 50, up from 53% from 2022. Let me read a description of what your agency is doing to one particular company, Coinbase.
Okay, here we go.
Today's Wells notice does not provide a lot of information for us to respond to. The SEC staff told us that they have identified potential violations of securities law, but little more. We asked the SEC specifically to identify which assets on our platforms they believe may be securities, and they declined to do so. Today's Wells notice also comes after Coinbase provided multiple proposals to the SEC about registration over the course of months, all of which the SEC ultimately refused to respond to. So
let's go.
Coinbase repeatedly, 30 times, tried to come in and register with the SEC, and the SEC refused to respond. They then submitted a petition for a rulemaking, which was rebuked, which was completely ignored.
Please give this to Hester.
Then the SEC identified potential violations in a Wells notice, but refused to identify what those were. Howie, in your mind, is very clear. What participants in the crypto space are telling us is that this is totally unclear. Commissioner Peirce,
yes.
Is this moving target, is this lawlessness by the commission conducive to investor protection?
No, it's not.
Thank you.
Chair Gensler, I think we need
not
only FIT 21, but we need an SEC that actually establishes rules so that everybody knows what they are and enforces those rules instead of making everything a moving target and refusing to respond to requests from investors and providers of crypto assets what those rules are. But I want to move to another question really quickly. Over and over again, your administrative actions have been invalidated by the courts. And we've seen it in the proxy advisory rule, the private funds disclosure rule, the debt box example, the stock buyback rule, Grayscale, Ripple. Over and over and over and over again, your administrative actions have been struck down in federal court. Commissioner Peirce, what does this say about the legitimacy and reputation of the SEC when the agency is constantly losing in federal court?
Well, it certainly says we need to be a little more careful when we go out with proposals and when we take actions to make sure that we're acting within the constraints that Congress gave us. And these are things that, in many of these instances, private fund rule, advisor rule, for example, we knew ahead of time that there were legal questions about whether we had the authority to do what we did, but we moved forward, and this is not good for our institutional integrity.
Well, it's in administrative law files, violation of the APA, arbitrary and capricious actions, but let's go to the basics. The basics is statutory authority. And now we have West Virginia versus EPA and Loper Bright overturning Chevron.
Here we go.
In light of those decisions, Commissioner, can you identify any specific statutory authority, Commissioner Peirce, can you identify any specific statutory authority where Congress has granted the SEC authority to promulgate regulations that compel companies to disclose general and immaterial information about environmental or social issues?
As I pointed out in connection with the climate rule, I'm very concerned about moving beyond materiality. I think that we are on shaky legal ground when we move away from financial materiality, which is the touchstone of our disclosure.
Well, is there any statutory authority at all, specific statutory authority?
There are instances where Congress has told us specifically conflict minerals, for example, where we want you to go and do something regardless of the materiality.
Well, let me ask you this. Our colleagues, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Mr. Kasten and Mr. Vargas, introduced the Climate Risk Disclosure Act in the 116th Congress, and then the House passed a version of that in the 117th Congress, Representative Vargas's Corporate Governance Improvement Investor Protection Act. Those pieces of legislation, to their credit, to my colleagues' credit, attempted to confer specific statutory authority to the Commission to do what you did in the Climate Disclosure Rule. But guess what? The Senate didn't pass those laws. The fact that this body has proposed statutory authority but specifically declined to enact it into law, what does that say about the SEC's authority to promulgate the Climate Disclosure Rule?
Again, our baseline is materiality. If Congress wants us to do something in immaterial disclosures, then they can tell us to do that.
Point is, we haven't done it. You don't have the authority to do it. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Yeah,
The
well
gentleman
done.
from
Brett Barr.
Ohio, Mrs. Beatty, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. To our witnesses, let me start with you, Chair Gensler. I've got a couple questions I'm going to try to get through. The first one is on proxy advisory firms. As you know, these firms are contracted by investors to provide them with independent advice and analysis on proxy votes, which is where the shareholders are presented with an opportunity to vote on a whole host, a range of matters requiring the company's policy. Proxy advisory firms also help level the playing field for those smaller investors who may not have the money, the resources to conduct such research on their own. Can you tell me how the SEC's regulations on proxy advisory firms ensure that these firms are acting in the best interest of the shareholders?
It's a little bit complicated because the prior commission in 2020 had proposed and adopted a rule on proxy advisors that then has recently gotten, I guess the word would be vacated.
Want to turn this down for a second, David?
Word. Yeah. Commissioner Peirce, do I have that right word?
Oh, wait.
You're on this one.
All right.
If it's as complicated for you all, then
So no, I'm just saying because
I think she
the
just
rule
I think
that
you're
the
on your own. You're on
commission
your own for this
adopted
one.
in 2020 in a court.
She has no fear. All right, so this is not a crypto related question.
Right.
It seems to me that the anti-crypto group in Congress is kind of
Hang on, let me play this 1 second.
Is that right word? I guess the word would be vacated, but I have to get the right word. Commissioner Peirce, do I have that right word?
I'll defer to you as the lawyer on this one.
All right. All right.
Some collegial back and forth, right? Gary Gensler cannot not respect Commissioner Hester Peirce.
Right.
It's just impossible. So, okay, so it strikes me that many of the anti-crypto, against crypto members of Congress are just not really asking crypto questions, with the exception of Brad Sherman, who is just super, against crypto. Many of them are just asking other non-related crypto questions.
Right.
The pro-crypto tribe is, I thought Representative was our last representative here, Barr.
Barr was great. Barr was killer.
He was killer. And he did what I think we've all been wanting, which was ask questions directly, not of Gary Gensler, who gives the exact same answer every time he's brought in front of a congressional hearing, but ask those questions of Hester Peirce, who has not yet spoken in this way about crypto. And the crisp answers, right, in front of Congress. And the crisp answers coming out of Hester Peirce are just on point.
Right. Yeah. So precise, so poignant. You wishing that most people talked like this. And yeah, Gary just filibusters his time and just does this sneaky political workaround.
Yeah. I guess it's striking that this is so partisan, but I guess that's kind of what we kind of come to expect right now.
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah. Let's go back in.
This has raised concerns across the financial service industry, particularly due to overlapping implementation dates, rule requirements, and compliance periods, which has created uncertainty about how these regulations will intersect.
I want to go until at least Richie Torres.
So for small businesses, and I chair the Small Business Committee, and I am a small business, There are growing compliance burdens can be especially overwhelming, often stretching their already
What do they
limited resources.
determine the
capacity.
order?
So, Mr. Chairman, have you consulted with the National Economic Council or the Treasury Department regarding the effects of these numerous new regulatory requirements on millions of investors and retirement savers? And if you have, what feedback have they provided? And furthermore, is the SEC considering the significant resource strains that firms may face when required to implement these rules simultaneously?
We put each of our rules out with economic analysis and also a call to small businesses to get their feedback. And we do take it very much into consideration, whether it's from small businesses or if it were a comment from the Small Business Administration, for instance, if they had feedback for us. Or I think you mentioned the U.S. Treasury Department. On a number of our rules, not all of them, on a number of our rules, we go to them in advance, whether it's about the treasury markets or the capital structure. But we're an independent agency from the U.S. Treasury Department.
Commissioners Peirce or Uada, do you have a comment on that?
I think we consistently overlook the disproportionate effects on small businesses, and that has been very evident in our failure to use accommodations for small businesses. Occasionally, we give them a little more time, but I think we could do much more.
I agree. There is a disproportionate impact on small businesses, and in some cases, there are loopholes that allow us to not consider the effects. For investment advisors, the rules say you have to give special consideration if you have $25 million or less of assets under management. Well, as it stands today, you need to have at least $100 million of assets under management just to register with the SEC. So we conveniently take the position that we don't need to analyze the effects on smaller investment advisors because we don't have them registered with the SEC under this $100 million threshold.
All right, thank you. In recent years, the expense of entering U.S. public markets has skyrocketed, which the cost of doubling since the 1990s, and consequently the number of publicly traded companies has plummeted, with many choosing against initial public offerings. So this reduction in IPO activity has diminished investment opportunities and slowed both growth and innovation. Although the SEC tasked with the fostering capital formation, its current regulatory efforts have centered on expanding complex and expensive disclosure requirements rather than tackling the obstacles that companies face in going public. So with over 68 regulatory actions on the agenda, not one directly addresses capital formation, which is key to market accessibility, and instead, the emphasis on more stringent regulations has made U.S. markets less appealing, so further discouraging companies from coming here, particularly small businesses, and from entering the public sector. So Commissioner Peirce, how has the SEC's focus on increasing regulatory and disclosure obligations rather than facilitating capital formation contributed to the decline of the IPO activity and the reduction in the number of U.S. publicly traded companies?
You're raising such an important issue because if companies don't go public early in their lives, retail investors have a very difficult time getting access to them. There are many reasons, but regulatory burdens are one, and all we're doing is adding to that list of requirements for public companies. We're not thinking about right-sizing it, and so it is a real problem. And that's why one of the reasons we're not seeing companies go public.
Limited time. Another favor of the SEC's under Chairman Gensler has been the inadequate consideration of opposing viewpoints in the agency's regulatory agenda. This practice is particularly risky because excluding diverse input can lead to regulations that lack real-world analysis and overlook how they might proportionally impact smaller firms, limit investment opportunities, or raise the cost for market investment. So it's crucial for any regulatory agency to actually seek and incorporate feedback from all stakeholders to fully understand the potential consequence of its actions from every perspective. So with limited time, Commissioner Uada, how does the SEC's tendency to push forward major rulemaking without adequate public input increase risk for investors?
That's been, I think, the biggest problem with all of these overlapping, complicated rulemakings. We're not getting the input we need to make a good decision.
Yield my time.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Vargas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see Torres.
I want to thank you and the ranking member for convening this important hearing, and I want to add my voice to the chorus of those who have been saying thank you. for your service and your fairness. I think you've treated all of us very fair.
First.
And I think it is a big loss to this
Great
institution.
tie. How do you feel about that tie?
Well,
bullish.
Whatever your endeavors are after this.
Well,
Again, thank you.
Let me look
I'd also thank the commissioners,
really
the chairman, and the rest of the commissioners for being here.
I don't think it's that
and
bullish.
for the service for your country for the past 90 years. The SEC has been fulfilling its stated mission of protecting investors, maintaining fair and orderly and efficient markets, and facilitating capital formation. Under your leadership, we've seen increased transparency for investors, increased accountability for those committing fraud. This makes it so investors get to decide which risks they would like to take, so long as the public companies hold up their end of the bargain by providing full, fair, and faithful disclosure. But I want to blame all of you, and in particular, Chairman, I want to blame you.
What?
For a very boring meeting today.
Oh my God.
Very boring.
Really?
And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is there isn't the whole gaggle of reporters and camera people here in the front. Because you've done a good job.
I knew that was coming.
And because the markets are doing well. If you had messed up, there'd be a whole bunch of reporters here wanting to know, but even my colleagues are not here. They all left. Boring hearing. So I want to blame all of you for working so hard to make this.
Stop being so fantastic, guys.
Meeting.
You're doing such a great job.
I do follow politics a little bit. And I heard the 2020 election, or something like this, a prediction. The stock market will crash if Biden wins in 2020.
He's not talking about
you know who made that
it's
comment?
Trump, right?
Anything important.
I think you know who made that comment?
As a Trump quote.
And now that same individual says, if we lose, we're going to have a crash like you wouldn't believe. And went further, the largest stock market crash.
All right, so he's just like
ever
using this as a platform to say what he wants. He's like, "Thank you, you're doing a great job. No further questions." Now I'm going to talk about like how.
And now we're going to talk about like Trump and MAGA people and why you need to like vote Kamala and why the Democrats are good. This is what I'm talking. It's like the same with Maxine Waters. It's like stroke the SEC's dick. Gary Gensler doing a great job. MAGA Republicans are trying to destroy this nation and like some other stuff.
Yeah, I'm here for the substance, honestly, the policy, and I feel like that's coming from people like Representative Williams. Did you ever see that? You ever see this chart, David? This one right here: private equity versus S&P 500 total return, right? So this is charted from 1990 all the way to I guess this is current day, so this is 2010 or whatever, but it doesn't go that far. But basically, private equity and public markets were about the same. But then with increasing complexity, regulatory issues, the difficulty of launching a publicly traded company started to increase, such that companies just launched later and later and later and later. So even the big tech companies like Facebook, like Microsoft, you could get in incredibly early and get rich as a retail investor who saw potential in Microsoft stock and technology and company, right? That's just no longer possible under this existing regime. I think so. As boastful as Gary is about his equity markets, they're not just retail fair markets in the way that he thinks they are. And that's why a lot of investors, retail investors, see upside potential in crypto assets because
it's always been the potential.
Start at $0 publicly traded.
Yeah.
Ether started at $0 publicly traded.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the substance that I'd like to see more of. And
we got some of that from a Republican. Was that Barr? No, who was?
No, this is Rep. Williams, Roger Williams.
Williams brought that up.
Yeah, Republican out of Texas here.
Yeah,
because I do think that the rule that you've adopted is a very good one, but you didn't go far enough, and we have difference of opinions. Did you have the authority to do that, Mr. Chairman? Promulgate and ultimately adopt the rule that you had?
I very much do think so. I think it was grounded in materiality, very much grounded in materiality to investors, not to others, solely to investors. And I want to augment something a fellow commissioner said. I think we all five do get on pretty well. We have policy differences, but that's by design. Congress wanted this to be a robust policy debate. And I've chaired a
there's some people are doing a policy debate.
I really do.
Other people are just doing something else.
Give and take that we have.
My time is about up. So again, I'd just like to thank all of you for your service. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. And now we'll recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, the whip, the Republican whip, Mr. Emmer.
Let's go.
Oh, Emmer's on. Bring it.
Leadership comes from the top, correct?
Leadership comes from a lot.
Oh, what happened?
My stream is buffering. Wow, that's a terrible time to buffer.
A lot of things, but the top matters a lot.
It's yes. The answer is yes, sir. But under your leadership at the SEC, it appears that you expect political allegiance, not just from the political appointees, but also from the civil servants you hired. Isn't that correct?
It's not correct, sir.
Well, sir, that's yet another deliberate distortion of the truth. The House has obtained emails between you and your now Director of Training and Markets. He interviewed with you and then sent you a follow-up email reassuring you, sir, that he aligned with your political views. So, that to me seems like you expect political allegiance from the people that you hire as civil servants at the SEC. The way you hire and the culture you require encourages your staff to have loyalty to you, above the law and above the mission of the SEC. Which brings us to the debt box case in Utah, where your attorneys, who no doubt heard your anti-crypto rhetoric, which is not based in law, went out and deliberately lied to a court in order to effectuate the commands from their chair to prosecute crypto companies. Boo! Chair Gensler, do you know of any other time in history where the SEC has been sanctioned by a court for material misrepresentation?
First, if I might say, when we hire folks, we hire them.
Reclaiming my time, sir. The answer to that question is no, it has never happened. But let me ask you another one. Does the fact that we're talking about this today even slightly embarrass you?
Look, the matters in that case were not well handled, and we've said that to the court.
Reclaiming my time again. The debt box case should absolutely be embarrassing to you, sir.
Wow.
And just to be clear, the SEC had to pay with taxpayer dollars nearly $2 million in legal fees for this material misrepresentation, for this lie. You are aware of that, I'm sure. Is the debt box case the reason that why the SEC's head of crypto asset and cyber unit resigned in June, sir?
Damn.
No, they went to take another job.
Okay, so no one in a senior level position here in Washington, D.C. has been held responsible for this complete abuse of taxpayer dollars. The SEC broke the law, your attorneys lied to the court, and no one in your leadership here in D.C. has been held accountable. That tracks. Seems like business as usual here in Washington. Okay, switching gears very quickly. It's been recently reported that Vice President Harris has finally said she'd craft clear rules of the road for the digital asset space if she becomes president. Is this your approach too, sir, or do you think she's rebuking you because she doesn't think you've done a good enough job establishing these clear rules over the last 3 years of her administration?
I think that there's laws in place. If Congress wishes to change them, they'll change them. But we are enforcing the laws, and there are many people in this field
so you don't
that are
think
not
she's
following
rebuking
the laws.
Reclaiming my time. Well, it's very interesting that you view your performance that way, because we have a litany of court cases, extraordinary confusion in the marketplace, and millions of Americans pining for clarity from you. You've abused the agency's enforcement tools, and you've even baited companies eager to comply with you, only to hit them with enforcement actions. You've retaliated against businesses and people who have come before this committee to talk about the next generation of American finance. And perhaps somehow, worst of all, you've made up the term crypto asset security. This term is nowhere to be found in statute. You made it up. You never provided any interpretive guidance on how crypto asset security might be defined within the walls of your SEC. Yet, you made the broad proclamation that you believe a majority of tokens are crypto asset securities. You did this, and you deliberately used this made-up term as the basis for your entire enforcement crusade over the past 3 years, only for your lawyers to retract it in a footnote to a court just last week. Your inconsistencies on this issue, sir, have set this country back. We could not have had a more historically destructive or lawless chairman of the SEC. And I yield back.
Woo! That's it.
Yield back. Woo! Mr. Gaston,
Let's go.
now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks all for being here. I
And he
want
just
to
gets up and leaves.
first follow up on
He's like, I'm
what
done.
my friend Mr. Barr raised earlier about this issue around ESG rules. When Congressman Vargas and I had introduced these bills last year, one of our big concerns
Do you hear him?
was,
Did you
if people
hear
don't want to invest in
Tom
ESG
Emmer?
funds, that's fine.
Oh
There is this inconsistency.
You deliberately made up the term crypto asset securities. And
You
now
just
you're trying
made
to
it
withdraw.
up. Like, why do we have to suffer through like 2 hours of nothing to get to
Let's start with you,
that?
Commissioner
And we get
Crenshaw.
like 4 minutes of that,
Would
which
you
is
be
great.
supportive of establishing a
that's all
regulatory
we get.
regime for ESG ratings providers?
Like, man.
Gary knew he was going to be grilled. I mean, it was just like,
Yeah, when
you
Tom,
know,
when Tom Emmer was coming, God, Tom Emmer is like, there's
Okay. Well, I'd
like
love
one
to-
person I do not
love
want
to
to be
follow
yelled
up, 'cause I do
at
think
by.
that
It's Tom Emmer.
politicizing this, but there still is the issue that we have clear accounting rules for other issues. We should have clear accounting rules there as well. Appreciate it. We'll follow up offline on that one. I want to shift now to some concerns I have that have come up a couple times here about merging the functions of the self-reporting organizations into the SEC,
Who comes
specifically
next?
FINRA and the PCAOB. Now, if I'm doing my math right, if we were to merge FINRA and the PCAOB into
Davidson,
the
I think, comes
SEC, that
next.
would more than double the SEC's headcount, just looking at the number of employees of those agencies, and would probably increase your budget by 75%.
And I think
or
after
so.
Warren Davidson, I don't know if there's much left.
I think there's a rich conversation about whether the people who would look to merge would also increase your budget in order to do that. But Chair Gensler, I'd like to shift to you. In your view, and I'm sorry, I'm going to peek around Ms. Williams' head here. How does FINRA and PCAOB oversight supplement the work of the SEC? And if they were to be merged, could they still do all the things they do now, or would there be some gaps in what we were able to do?
I think that Congress could, of course, change this, but we have
I don't see which
self-regulatory organizations,
stands, even though he's
particularly
on
in
this
FINRA's
committee.
case, that is the regulator, sort of the first line of regulation for broker-dealers. It goes all the way back to the late 1930s, something called the Maloney Act that Congress passed. And that certainly allows industry and the broker-dealers to get the benefit of that, but then we are the official sector overseeing the overall industry. And that's worked reasonably well over the decades. There's certainly times where there's been gaps in that. The PCAOB, great debates in this Congress 20-some years ago about taking that and moving it into an agency that was done in a trade association. The AICPA used to inspect and set standards for the auditing field, and better to do it in something overseen by this 5-member commission. Again, Congress could change that, but I think that too has its benefits to be outside of the agency.
And I'm not asking you to opine on whether we could do it, but it seems to me that, as outside organizations, FINRA has private enforcement mechanisms if broker-dealers are violating the rules. I don't think you'd have that ability if you came in, right? If they were inside the SEC, could you still do private enforcement, or would you have to subpoena information? Could you take the fifth?
No, we'd have to follow federal law and do things in a way.
Exactly. So essentially, bringing them in would make them weaker as institutions.
I think it would. One of the things that might make it weaker is also the funding point that you say. So both PCAOB and FINRA have funding models that basically tap into their members, and as in the PCAOB's case, Congress approved a funding model that then we annually approve that budget as a commission.
No, I share the concern. Like, we're going to continue to highlight this in part because these are lifted directly out of Project 2025. This idea that we should weaken organizations, we should put them in places where others are involved. And I'd like to unanimous consent to enter into the record President Trump's right-wing policy map called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise.
Without objection or general leave.
So thank you. We'll bring that in. And again, the concern, we've seen a lot of proposals that are lifted straight out of that, from UDAP hearings, eliminating CFPB funding, and indeed weakening the SEC. And I want to make sure that we address those issues and understand the importance of investor protection. So thank you all for doing what you do, for being here, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk, now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for
being here. It's a historic moment to have everyone here together. Unfortunately, we only get 5 minutes apiece. I think we could sit here for a couple of days to explore some things. If any of you have followed any of my previous questioning, you know that my greatest concern is the consolidated audit trail from a constitutionality, cost, and vulnerability standpoint. Someone who spent almost 30 years in the IT.
All right, this is not about crypto. I don't think Richie Torres is here. I think the last person worth listening to is Warren Davidson, but I don't think he. Did these just go alphabetically? I haven't been paying attention to the last names.
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah. How much longer do you want to stream this?
You know what's kind of interesting? I would love to, if maybe our team listening to this could just try to get a list of like how many more we have, if that's even possible to get. But if not,
so I have how many members there are, and there are like 29 Democrats, 23 Democrats, and 29 Republicans. I don't think that they're all here, so we don't really know. Because they can't all be here.
All right. You know, one thing that's interesting about this is like it's. All I'm seeing here asking questions are either A's on Stand with Crypto or F's.
That's a good point.
There's like one D. It's just like extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so wild to me that there's not like, I'm not sure yet. I haven't made up my mind. Like there's no in between here. It's very polarized as well.
Well, remember 2 years ago when crypto was getting increasingly political? One of the big talking points that we had was that and this is great because crypto is so bipartisan, like both Democrats and Republicans align with crypto. And then slowly the ball just fell onto one side.
Yeah.
And it just became increasingly partisan. And now we're seeing it here, right? If it's not actually effective messaging about the functioning and the legitimacy of the SEC, then it's the Democrats just saying thank you for your fantastic service, and MAGA Republicans suck and are dangerous.
I did hear, though, in the opening comments before I joined, I was listening a little bit. Maxine Waters said something about stablecoin legislation. That's not at all related to SEC, but she said, I'm hopeful we can get stablecoin legislation here cooking.
Yeah, so it was a jab at Patrick McHenry, too. It was kind of blaming Patrick McHenry and his tribe for not pushing forward stablecoin legislation.
Oh, why? Because McHenry prioritized FIT, which is again, the FIT legislation is sort of understanding what's a security and what's a commodity in crypto. Yeah. And she, she thinks he could have gone. Yeah, I mean, he wants stablecoin legislation too, though.
Yeah, he wants both, right? And there's no way that whatever stablecoin legislation that Maxine Waters wants is good for crypto.
You don't think so?
I'm guessing not. I mean, Maxine Waters anywhere near my legislation.
Not for decentralized crypto. There's a lot of wins for the U.S. government in terms of just exporting the dollar on crypto rails. It just could not be clear. That should be so bipartisan. Even if you're a statist, super authoritarian type of individual who absolutely hates crypto, right? I mean, your stablecoin legislation, you have the ability to freeze accounts. You have the ability to just surveil them all. You should have no problem with some sort of stablecoin legislation. Now, whether they try to pack in the banning of your self custody or something like that, you just I guess maybe that's what you're worried about.
Well, I'm just worried about any legislation coming out of Democrats is going to be something about control. The big theme of all the Democrats when they do bring up crypto is all about the loss of control that their government has over crypto. It's not about innovation. It's not about markets. It's just hey, this might take away our control.
Yeah,
and we're concerned about that.
Yeah. Do you hear the representative asking about, saying that Kamala Harris weighed in and Gary Gensler, do you consider this weighed in a positive way on crypto? And Gary Gensler, do you consider this a rebuke of you and your administration? Right? And this is referring to a comment she made earlier in the week that was very short, but also the first comment that she ever made about digital assets.
She said the words digital assets.
She said the words digital assets. I think the quote is something like, let's see, I will, as president, this is Kamala Harris speaking in a speech in front of is the Wall Street executives, I believe, encourage innovative technologies like AI and digital assets while protecting consumers and investors. So that's the first time she's ever said anything about crypto in quotes. But it's interesting the phraseology of that, right? So one, she didn't say crypto. She said digital assets.
Right.
Which
she didn't
what
say
is
our
that?
words. She said their words, not our words.
Yeah.
Like if you want the support of our industry, you need to say our words.
Yeah, call it like what they are. I mean, they're using this sort of, I guess, you polished version of.
It's the trad version. It's
the
like
trad
the
version.
It's the BlackRock version.
And then Jake Chervinsky made the point that this protecting consumers and investors, like what does that mean? While protecting consumers and investors, right? Gary Gensler could be like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I'm doing. It's totally consistent. So not very much of a supportive statement from Kamala Harris.
I thought this tweet thread was pretty good, which I'm sending to you in Discord, from Jesse Eckel. And he's kind of just alluding to the idea that like Kamala is saying the same thing that Gary Gensler says, which is like, I'm here to support digital assets. Like I'm here to support crypto. Like I'll support them. And ask Brad how Gary's pro-innovation approach is protecting investors, right? Gary is all about innovation and protecting investors. And so he made all of these like tweets of Gary Gensler's statements that are very similar to Kamala's saying, I'm here to support digital assets.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, right?
It really matters what you mean by support. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I will encourage innovative technologies like digital assets while protecting consumers and investors. And I guess, Jesse's making the point that that's a lot like what Gary Gensler is saying. I'm already doing this.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I was not even lukewarm on that quote. I mean, I guess good to hear Kamala Harris get off zero.
She acknowledged the existence of crypto.
Wow.
Whether it's positive or negative is completely TBD.
That is so weak. All right, what do you want to do with the rest of the stream here?
Well, also, did you see Stand with Crypto's tweet?
No.
Oh, bro, it's so bad, man. So now that Kamala Harris has issued a somewhat supportive statement about crypto, she is now given a B on Stand with Crypto.
That's quite the upgrade. I don't think we've earned that upgrade.
I don't think we've earned that at all. And this is what crypto Twitter is all like upset about in this present moment, which is just like, yo, the B? He's getting a B?
Somewhat supportive after this. This is the notable statement we have.
Notable statements, yeah. Somewhat pro crypto. Oof. And so Gabe Shapiro, of course, the political attack dog, does his rabbit hole research, and apparently whoever's running the Stand with Crypto is also an ex-Biden staffer, and so now everyone is like, well, Stand with Crypto is now completely biased, and so we don't trust them anymore. And honestly, how can you blame them when you look at this fucking a B? Kamala has a B.
Have to have some more objective. I mean, my take on this is she's still
NA.
We don't know for sure.
We don't know anything.
Maybe you could do an F+ or a low D, a D- based on this statement, maybe. Yeah. But you'd also have to call into play, because she's the only executive on this list besides Donald Trump in the executive office. You really have to look at her cabinet. You really have to look at the administration she's selecting. My overall take on this is, if she brings in the Biden administration, the architects of Choke Point 2.0 for crypto, she brings in the exact same people, or many of the same people, as her economic policy advisors, as her leaders in Treasury, as her leaders in kind of all of the government agencies. The same people. You're going to have the same outcome. You're going to have the same kind of choke point. Maybe she'll be checked a little bit by Congress, but geez, man, Congress isn't completely unified on this either. Yeah. So you have another administrative state that's attacking crypto. That's not B material.
Right. That's the far more effective analysis. Giving her a B is, you are doing an F grade on your homework if you're giving Kamala a B. It's the most unrigorous analysis, unhelpful analysis that you can possibly give.
You got to earn it. I am not clicking that donate button. Wow.
There's a donate button?
I mean, I think maybe that's there for all the politicians. Let's see here. Yeah, it's there for all of them, to be fair.
Well, what about find like a C or D or F?
Oh, you want to? I got my favorite F.
Yeah, Brad.
Donate.
They have a donate button. All right.
Fair.
Well, why do they have a donate button?
Just donate to all. You should gray it out. No, they should like go back to Patrick McHenry.
it just should focus over to like whoever's got it. Pick a random A person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's too bad. I mean, I think overall, Stand with Crypto is doing a great job. I think they very much want some support in a Kamala Harris administration, so they're probably grading it on a curve in like a massive way in order to get that support. But the problem is it ruins the neutrality, the credible neutrality of this platform.
It totally does.
Yeah.
It totally does.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Okay.
We're about to get Warren Davidson on.
All right. Let's
atrocity to do that.
Who's speaking now? Representative
I think she just ended.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, the chair of the Housing Subcommittee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McHenry, for putting this historic hearing together, long in the making. Thank you to our witnesses. It's great to have all 5 of you here today. Today's hearing directs attention to the Commission's dysfunctions and, frankly, to the Chairman's politicization of the Commission and its work. Let me highlight 7 failures. Abuse of the rulemaking procedures, 61 so far, inappropriately short public comment periods, unworkable and unlawful ESG disclosure mandates, Hotel California style rules for crypto.
Oh yeah, he left that
where they all have the ability or direction to come check in anytime you like, but never with the authority to leave with some approval or clarity. Endless discovery with no resolution, no clarity, regulation by enforcement for crypto. An unworkable proposal to overhauling our equity market structure, de facto ban on crypto through proposed custody rule, and failure to work with Congress, frankly undermining the work that Congress done to provide clarity here. So as many of my colleagues have done today at this hearing, the courts have, even the DOJ, have highlighted severe mismanagement. The list goes on, but unfortunately, I do have limited time. Commissioner Peirce, would you say that the SEC's rulemaking and enforcement agenda reflects the priorities of the commissioners as a whole, or has the commission become an extension of Chairman Gensler's agenda?
The agenda is the chairman's agenda.
Do you get a sense of elaboration? I mean, I saw one of the commissioners today look like it might be the first time he was asked his opinion on something, expected to ratify whatever Chairman Gensler throws out there.
I mean, I think the issue is that Chair Gensler has a lot of ideas that he's trying to move forward on, and there are other things that I think we should be spending our time on that we're not spending our time on. And so I think that's the nature of some of our disagreements.
Problems being left unsolved. I appreciate you for highlighting many of them. My concern is just that by taking the world's best capital markets, I mean, we don't even have 5% of the world's GDP, but we have over 50% of the world's invested capital. We're taking something that works pretty well, that needs clarity and oversight to continue. Instead, we're working with a declared war by Secretary Warren and other Gary Gensler allies to undermine our capital markets and some of the most innovative companies out there. For that reason, I proposed the SEC Stabilization Act as a structural reform to deal with our Gary Gensler problem, but also with the structural challenges at the SEC that highlight it can be exploited by bad actors. One of the areas that I want to highlight is special purpose broker-dealers. Commissioner Peirce, do you believe that a special purpose broker-dealer process could provide a first step towards broker-dealers handling tokenized securities?
I mean, at the time that it came out, I said it could be a baby step, but that was 4 years ago, and this baby's not walking yet. So I'm not as optimistic as I was back then.
Yeah, I'm concerned as well, and it kind of creates a separate path where some of Chairman Gensler's friends and allies could get special permission and the rest of the market be excluded. For each commissioner, maybe we'll start down there with you, Mr. Ueda. Have you or any member of your staff been instructed by the SEC staff to direct or otherwise ask FINRA to avoid approving broker-dealer applications with crypto assets?
No, I have not.
Commissioner Peirce?
No, but TM is, our Trading and Markets Division is the one that interacts with FINRA. So it's, I mean, the issue is that there's a cultural there's clear messaging from the SEC that we're not trying to move the crypto industry forward, and that's reflected in this as well.
Thank you. Commissioner?
No.
No, and I think I might disagree a little bit with the clear messaging point from Commissioner Peirce on the clear direction. I think there's lots of rhetoric, and we can get down to brass tacks and look at ways to move forward.
Well, Mr. Gensler, no surprise, many of us aren't fans of your approach to the job, but it does seem that you've abused your authority, and you seem to kind of gloat as candidate Harris decides that she wants to pivot on crypto and say, no, you can trust us. We're going to be okay on this. It seems like you're gloating. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. The war on crypto goes on. So as you highlighted, you meet with the chairman of the Federal Reserve regularly. Do you guys discuss things like Operation Choke Point 2.0, the way to block and restrict market certainty for crypto-affiliated firms?
I've never heard that term, and I'd also want
Get the fuck out of here.
Half of the rules that we've adopted, 42 rules, half of them have actually been bipartisan.
Some of the work's been good, but a lot of it's been bad. Last question, Commissioner Ueda. What would it take to allow distributed ledger to be the official record of ownership for tokenized securities? If you could respond in writing, that'd be good, because my limited time has expired. I yield.
Gentleman yields. We'll now go to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres.
There's Richie. Oh, he just came in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gensler, suppose I were to sell you a Yankee ticket and tell you that the Yankee ticket could appreciate in value. It could be resold at a profit in the secondary market. And as is the case with all sports tickets, suppose the proceeds from the sale of the Yankee ticket goes toward paying for the Yankee game. By selling you the Yankee ticket, am I entering into an investment contract with you and therefore conducting an unregistered security offering?
I appreciate the question. I don't know all the facts and circumstances.
Oh, get the fuck out of here!
I know where we're headed here, Representative, but I don't think so in that Yankee.
So a Yankee ticket is not, and why is a Yankee ticket not a security?
Well, it's really a question, and the courts have been clear on this, is the offer and sale.
Specifically with a Yankee ticket, though, when you're buying a Yankee ticket, what are you purchasing?
You're buying
access to a Yankee game. Is that fair to say?
I understand. It's been a while since I went to a Yankee game, but
you're welcome to a Yankee game.
I used to live in New York, and my three daughters were all born in New York.
So in the Stoner Cats case, creators were selling an NFT that offered access to an animated web series. From the standpoint of federal securities law, is there a legal difference between buying a Yankee ticket that offers you the experience of a Yankee game and buying an NFT that offers you the experience of an animated web series?
Again, I don't want to comment on any one specific
it was a settlement, it's a fait accompli. It's not an ongoing litigation. You can comment on it.
But it's about how is something offered and sold. Is it offered and sold as an investment contract? Or are individuals looking to a common enterprise anticipating profits based on the efforts?
Well, I'm familiar with the definition. You're avoiding the question. See, here's the danger I see with the Gensler theory of investment contracts.
It's actually the Supreme Court's theory of investment.
Well, your idiosyncratic interpretation of the Supreme Court theory. The expectation or promise that an object could appreciate in value or that an object could be sold at a profit in the secondary market, that expectation or profit could be retrospectively attributed to just about any collectible or any consumer good or any piece of art or any piece of music. The trouble with the Gensler theory of investment contracts is that it's so open-ended that it lacks anything resembling a limiting principle. It blurs the line between collectible and security, between art and security. Ms. Crenshaw, does requiring artists and musicians to register art and music with the Securities and Exchange Commission raise a First Amendment concern?
I'm not a First Amendment expert, but I would think the only thing that have to be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission are securities. And so that's what I would look to determine whether they have to register with us.
Now, in the Stoner Cats case, the SEC not only prohibited the creators from selling NFTs, the SEC ordered the creators to destroy the NFTs.
Did they
Does
really?
The destruction of artistic expression by government fiat raise a First Amendment concern?
Again,
You're not a First Amendment expert?
I'm not a First Amendment expert.
Do you need to be? Do you think artistic expression is protected under the First Amendment? Do you need to be a First Amendment expert to answer that question?
I think the ins and outs of First Amendment law are actually very nuanced, so I would not want to opine.
Do you
on
think the SEC has an obligation under the First Amendment to take care not to have a chilling effect on artistic expression on the blockchain?
I think we can work together to advance the interests of the industry, and I think our markets are the highlight of the world because of the laws that have been in place for 90 years.
You're not answering my question. In a September 12th court filing, the SEC had to apologize for using a term it invented out of thin air, digital asset security. The fictional term digital asset security perpetuates the false narrative that digital assets in themselves are securities. In the Howey case, as you know, Mr. Gensler, the Supreme Court never held that orange groves in themselves were securities. The Supreme Court held that orange groves can be part of investment contracts, which are securities.
That's such a good point.
The same logic applies to digital assets. In my view, using the term digital asset securities is as intellectually dishonest as using the term orange grove securities. Mr. Gensler, would you ever use the term orange grove securities?
I don't believe I have.
Or would, right? Because it gives the impression that orange groves in themselves are securities, and that would be misleading.
Damn.
I see my time has expired.
Whoa, God, that was good. Oh, no.
That was so good.
Oh, no.
Chairman McHenry and
Richie Torres.
Waters for holding this hearing. And
from the
thank you to our
top rope.
It's a pleasure and rare honor to have you all here together.
Skewered.
Gensler, earlier this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission suspended the consolidated audit trail, or CAP.
All right. I think that's going to be the last crypto subject of this whole entire hearing.
All right, let me just check Mr. Rose, who he is. Let me just check Rose. Dude, that was so good.
That was so good. God, I think he must have practiced.
All right, Rose is strongly supportive. You want to be mid?
Despite its failure to address any of the concerns raised by commenters, the SEC has now allowed these identical fee filings to go into effect. Chair Gensler, can you identify any changes made in the August fee filings that addressed concerns raised by commenters? Or
we already, I mean, that was peak. How can you get better than
I think that's
Torres?
it. Torres always comes towards the end, too.
Wow.
That was
phenomenal. So good. I mean, asking about artistic expression, just pivoting from the question to Gary Gensler to Crenshaw, who's like not been put on the spot in this way, is not as good at like kind of dodging and slithering out of the question, right? Yeah. So like asking her specifically whether utility NFTs, the destruction of an NFT, pictures of cats, JPEGs of cats registered to the blockchain, whether that constitutes a violation of the First Amendment, an artistic instruction, in the courts to actually destroy the NFTs, and having Crenshaw try to respond to that, and she couldn't. I'm not an expert on First Amendment. Do you need to be an expert on the First Amendment to understand that you can't destroy a First Amendment? Crenshaw going back and saying, well, we've created hundreds of trillions in capital. We're the envy of the world. It's a freaking NFT.
Right, of a cat.
Of a cat. What are you talking about?
Dude, I didn't think that we could get anything better than Tom Emmer, because Tom Emmer's was just like, 10 out of 10. Yeah. But man, Richie Torres, man, that was so good.
It was actually Richie Torres was first place for me. First place. I'm kind of like ranking our like advocates here. Richie came in first, Tom Emmer second, and then
very close second. Very close second. Yeah.
Warren Davidson was good too.
Great. Warren Davidson did great, and then of course Patrick McHenry at the start.
Yeah. All good, man.
Good
all right.
Good
there we go. We did it.
Fun. Thanks to all the 500, 600 people that were watching us with us.
Yeah.
This is great.
Hope
to do it again soon.
Yeah. Tell them to subscribe. You got to subscribe. If you're not subscribed to Bankless, what's a good reason to subscribe?
If you like people clowning on Gary Gensler and Brad Sherman and Maxine Waters, this is the home. No one does it better than us. So like and subscribe. Thanks everyone for staying tuned with us.
See you later. Bye.
Bye, guys.